then there is the contract sum, and they range in value from a low of 17,080,000 up to a high of 29.996 million, which is just below the 30 million threshold, totaling $218.3 million. The payments that have been made as at July 2019 totaled $170.8 million, and only one of them seems to have been, well, one of them equals the actual original contract price. That's the one for Innswood High. The others are, the total payments made are less than the contract sum as at July this year. Then there's the proposed variation cited by the Auditor General is set out, and they range from 0 for 3 of the projects, and then there's one of 6.7 million, one of 7.3 million, one of 8.7 million, and then one of 22 million, and those total variations are $59 million. And then there's a column says actual variations, which is $11.4 million according to this, and relates to 2 of the schools. So there are variations in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the schools projects cited by the Auditor General, totaling the 59 million. So 6 projects, 6 schools, and then the Ministry is saying that 2 of them were actual variations, totaling 11.4 million for Alexander College and Bryce Primary. And the expected total payments, according to this, is $237 million versus the $218 million. So if you add the 11.4 to the 218, then you would get roughly 229, 230, and the total expected payment is 237 million. Not sure what that $7 million difference is, but there's a note here. The Auditor General's report cited 59.06 million for proposed variations for 6 projects as shown in the table above. However, only 2 of these projects had variations, Alexander College and Bryce Primary, for 8.4 million and 3 million respectively, totaling 11.4 million. Therefore, the other costing represented the remaining 4 projects are quotations for proposed works, which was not done. I see. Okay. All right. Could you just explain, P.S., I don't know if you can, why the total expected payments is roughly $7 million more than the sum of the original contract price and the actual variations?
Okay, good morning, Chairman and members. I'm just going to ask you to give me just a minute to get that response from the technical officer, sir.
Okay, no problem. In terms of the other aspect of the attachment to that letter, this is a listing of the 25 projects managed by the National Education Trust, of which direct and indirect emergency contracting were used in every case, I think, it seems. And parish council approvals were obtained. In 25 of them, there were no parish council approvals obtained in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 25. So just around 25% of them didn't get parish council approval. All right. Then there's another submission. And I'll read the cover letter. Again, it's to the committee clerk from P.S. McLean. As promised in our previous response to the Public Accounts Committee's question regarding design and build contracts with the Caribbean Maritime University, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information hereby submits additional information on similar projects that have been undertaken by the Caribbean Maritime University. And there's a fairly substantial attachment to that, with internal and external projects listed. We have as external projects, 2014 there was one at UTEC for 2 floors of offices, In 2015, there was one for Pika at Constant Spring Road, which was a waiting room. 2017, there was a $14.9 million project for the Ministry of Transport and Mining to do with the exam depot at Maypen for the Island Traffic Authority. And then Sam Sharp Teachers College, 147 million in 2018, proposed 8 classrooms, of which only 2 were completed. Money advanced to Sam Sharp of $15 million by the ministry out of the 147. Maybe you can explain what happened with that one. In terms of internal projects, there are a number listed here. And these are all, I assume, educational institutions, since it's in schools, basically. Various recreational room, Block C, registry and treasury building, library storage, etc., etc. From 2014, there was one. 2016, there was one. 2017, there were 7. And 2018, there were 3. So definitely the use of the CMU accelerated after from 2016 onwards, and we don't have a total for those projects, but one of them, for example, the one for Block C, 18 classrooms, was 158 million. The engineering workshop expansion was 229 million, 3 floors. And then we have here, attached to that, an agreement between the Ministry of Transport and Mining and the CMI. And I'm trying to figure out what this agreement relates to. It's a contract from the 31st of January 2017. I see. And it's to do with the Maypen Island Traffic Authority. It's one of the external projects. And there's a bill of quantities for the SAMSHA. And so on. Members, I'm not going to propose to go into this in detail. If you want to have a look at it, it's before you. I just think the points to note are that the use of the CMU for internal works accelerated, as I say, quite significantly from 2016 onwards.
But the vast majority of their experience is doing work on their own campus, from the two, comparing the two lists, Mr. Chairman. So the vast majority of experience is doing work internally on the main campus of CMU, and relatively modest external experience.
You read internal projects as meaning at the CMU itself?
Sorry?
You read internal here as meaning at the CMU campus?
That's what I assumed.
That's what you assumed. Okay, I hadn't. I wasn't sure if it meant internal to the Ministry of Education, because the other ones are from other ministries. Well, some of them.
Well, some shop, I imagine, would be the Ministry of Education
true.
as well.
But transport and PICA are not.
And I don't know if anybody could clarify, but my assumption is that
right.
rec room is at CMU, Block C, CMU, etc., library, storage, outdoor cafeteria, all of these.
Doing work for themselves, yes.
Right, is really managing their own capital program.
Right. Right.
So what that would suggest is that, there was a, quantum leap in their appetite to take on external projects.
But what's not clear, though, is they only have 4 external projects listed here, and yet in the Auditor General's report, it was a much longer, more extensive list.
I'm assuming that these were, this is in addition to the ones in the Auditor General's report. I think the discussion, if I recall, Mr. Chairman, from that meeting, we're asking what was the experience. We're asking the PS what was the experience of the CMU outside of that particular, I think it was eight or nine that we were looking at the time. And I think this is in fulfillment of our commitment she gave us to do some research on
what other things they've done.
The other things they've done. So I'm assuming outside of what was identified in the Auditor General's report and those projects that we were looking on there, that this is the extent of their experience, both for internal projects and external projects.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And the Sam Sharp one doesn't seem to have progressed as originally planned, because it was originally proposed to be 8 classrooms that they would build for 147.4 million, but only 2 were completed, and 15 million was expended by the ministry for that.
So is that correct, PS? That this project is terminated, the Sam Sharp one?
No, it's not terminated, sir. Let me just provide a little explanation. The internal projects, you are correct, sir. They are projects for facilities at the institution of CMU. Sam Sharp, CMU currently has a campus at Sam Sharp as well. And the ministry is committed to improve or to increase the number of classrooms. So while the estimate is up to 147 million, we were only able to advance $15 million for the 2 classrooms that were completed. So Sam Sharp is on our plans going forward, but the ministry will take a decision as to the nature of the procurement we do for the continuation.
I see. So you're not necessarily going to have it finished by CMU?
Right. Yes, sir.
So CMU has a sort of sub-campus on the compound of Sam Sharp Teachers College?
Yes, sir. There's a partnership with the college for their CMU students to access CMU courses there.
But do they have a discrete area? I'm just trying to understand, was this the additional classrooms sort of a discrete area to deliver there, or they're just expanding the general capacity, the general classroom capacity of Sam Sharp? And these additional classrooms plus the existing lecture theaters, etc., will be used to deliver the CMU courses?
So we are expanding the general capacity of Sam Sharp Teachers College, and CMU, through partnership, they will determine the nature of the arrangements and the actual rooms that will make available for their courses.
All right, thank you, Pierre.
Chairman, just to provide the explanation for the breakdown in terms of the variation, just to say we inadvertently added the proposed variation of 7.3 million for Innswood to the expected total payment. So that really should have been 29 million 996 for Innswood.
Yes, okay.
So we made a mistake there. So in removing that, it would come back to the total of 229 million. My apologies, sir.
That's fine. Thank you very much. All right. So, members, having gone through that, the next item is the reading and confirmation of the minutes. Now, I must confess that I have not yet gone through the minutes from last Tuesday's meeting. So what I'm proposing to do is not to take the minutes today for that, but rather at our next meeting do the minutes for that and today, since it's really dealing with one issue anyway, one report. So we will move on to matters arising. Well, there are no other matters arising, are there? No. So we can continue the review. So where we are, members, I think is at page 7 of the prompt. If you have the same version of the prompt that I'm going from, it's issue 3, or sub-issue 3 rather, of issue 1. I think that's where we had reached, though I'm sure we have covered some of the ground already that we're going to come to, because we had a wide-ranging discussion, but let us just go through the prompt and finish it up. So sub-issue 3 on page 7 says, we expected the ministry to maintain a facilities maintenance register to include at minimum details of the physical condition of schools' facilities to inform its annual procurement plans. We found that despite schools submitting requests for repairs to facilities, the ministry was deficient in maintaining a proper facilities register and related maintenance plans. This is an essential first step in attaining the correct balance between routine and emergency works for an efficient and cost-effective maintenance program. However, the ministry only provided a proposed maintenance program for 2019-20 for 130 schools at an estimated cost of $1.2 billion. And the response from the ministry is that they have completed an comprehensive island-wide audit of all 974 public schools in Jamaica. This audit gives detailed information in terms of infrastructural works and maintenance. In addition, under the World Bank's Jamaica Safe School project, a detailed assessment of the structure of all schools has been completed. Both documents are now being utilized to phase the repairs and maintenance program over a 3-year period in accordance with the ministry's budget. And in terms of verification, the prompt says that a copy of special report submitted to Cabinet from March to June 2019 and the final report on Jamaica's Safe Schools project were received. Okay. Just, I'm not sure if we dealt with this last time, PS, but maybe you could just remind me. So having done this audit now of all of the schools, backed up by the World Bank's project, which did a detailed assessment of the structure of our schools, you know, a 3-year maintenance program that you're working from. What I'm asking is, going forward, how often do you plan to, or how do you plan to do audits to make sure that you're aware of the status of the physical plant of the school portfolio of the country going forward? So you had this audit done, but what do you plan to do going forward to ensure that you always have current information of what the maintenance needs are?
All right, so Chairman, it is our intention to develop a comprehensive maintenance plan which will not only include what we are projecting to repair over the 3-year period based on the budget, but will include the holistic support that is needed for each school. So for example, when the school needs painting, when the bathroom fixtures are supposed to be replaced, when the repairs to the doors, the windows, and so on. We are already in discussion with UTEC, with the World Bank report and the electronic database that was developed. And so they are willing to input this information which will be provided so that it can be accessed across the system by our schools and also be accessed by the ministry. Of course, different administrative rights at different levels. So this will assist us in at least having information at our fingertips in terms of when the school bathrooms are supposed to be upgraded or repaired. So we will no longer have to wait until there's a crisis or until a principal has reported that there's a crisis for the fixing to be done. It's going to take us another 6 months or so to input all of this data, because we will also need to ensure that there is the verification that is done by our building officers. So we are expecting that by the beginning of the 2020 school year, we will have a maintenance program over a 3-year period in terms of major infrastructural works, and we will also have the ongoing maintenance plans to ensure that we can continue to support the schools to improve the teaching learning environment.
Thank you. If there are any questions, if not, I'll move on to issue 2.
Yeah, just, you know, I've been reflecting from the last meeting, the approach that the ministry takes to maintenance. And it just seems to me that it would make a lot of sense to push a much bigger portion of the budget down to this level of the schools. Yes. We don't, anybody who lives in their home knows when it needs repainting.
Yes.
I mean, the principal and the staff will know when the school needs repainting. We don't need somebody from a region or a head office to come and tell them that. The basic maintenance, replacement of bathroom fixtures, plumbing. So the basic routine maintenance, which actually should be ongoing and preventative. Why don't we push a much bigger budget to the schools? Even I know you increased it from 30,000 to
150
to 150. But if you take a school like Mandeville Primary with 2,000 students, 150,000 is a joke. The pressure that 2,000 students put on a school plant, you know that 150,000 is inadequate. So you could work some system of figuring out the size of the school, etc., and make up allocation that should cover 80% or 90% of the of what is foreseeable and what is routine and what is preventative. Okay. And then if exceptional cases come up, then you can kick that up to the region or the central ministry level. But I really think we need to empower the schools, empower the school leadership as much as possible. As long as they have the competence to do it at that level, let us put it down there and just take off this, centralized bureaucracy, or reduce the centralized bureaucracy as much as possible and allow school boards and principals to demonstrate their own initiative at the level of the school.
Yes. MP, I believe that's an excellent idea that you have made, sir, as it relates to looking at the size of the school and determine what is actually a reasonable amount that would be required for the school on an ongoing basis. Just to say, sir, that last year we provided to 116 schools about 326 million maximum, upwards of some at least, some got over 15 million in some cases for major infrastructure work. So we developed what we called a service level agreement, and our building officers worked with the boards to do the procurement and to undertake the activities that they have to do locally. It has worked very well, and it prevented the bottleneck with the limited staff that we have at Central to get that done. So we will definitely take up this suggestion, sir, and look to see how we can expand this. The schools have already started to develop their policy, their school funding policy, which of course sometimes there is quite a bit of goodwill in the provision of support for other infrastructural works at the school. So that will also be integrated, and this will be monitored as a part of the overall maintenance support for the school, sir. So we will definitely take on the suggestions and ensure that we have all this information in the database. But what is important is to prevent the ongoing crises or emergency where we have to go the route of direct contracting for some of these maintenance issues.
All right, great, thank you. Move to issue 2. The ministry mainly operated a centralized procurement system for the purchase of textbooks, furniture, and repair and maintenance services, while its inventory systems were decentralized, which created misalignments with procurement activities. Schools are required to submit requests to the ministry for furniture and textbooks. However, the management of stock was mainly left to the schools, with few inspections of secondary school textbooks being conducted by the media service unit to facilitate redistribution among schools. Although schools across the island are grouped in 6 regions, the regional offices are largely concerned with monitoring and supporting schools in meeting educational performance targets. As a consequence, we found disproportionate quantities of school textbooks and furniture. Although the ministry would have experienced a decline in expenditure for textbooks, this was not the result of effective coordination between procurement activities and a robust inventory management system, but rather a shortfall in the purchase of supplies. And in the report, there are specific examples of schools where there were large numbers of textbooks kind of put down somewhere while a nearby school didn't have sufficient supply of that textbook. Management response. The Ministry acknowledges that we have a centralized procurement system which has been established to allow for economies of scale and value for money. However, the inventory system is partly central and partly decentralized. The Ministry has completed an island-wide audit of all textbooks in the system and has commenced the updating of the electronic inventory management system. The system is being further refined to allow each school to access and update its inventory at the local level. This will provide real-time information to inform the decision to be made by the Ministry, recollection, redistribution, and/or additional procurement. In terms of status and verification, the Auditor General says, audit update summary as at August 30th, 2019 shows the number of schools unaudited for textbooks was 99%. So what we're saying here is that you've done an island-wide audit of all textbooks in the system. You've commenced updating an electronic inventory management system, and it's being refined to allow each school to access and update its own inventory at the local level. And this will provide real-time information by which decisions can be made. Yes. Any questions? Yes, Member Hannah.
Good morning, everyone. P.S. One of the questions that I asked last week about the 63 QVCs, you had said that the 972 schools were divided into 63 QVCs.
Yes.
And I want to pick up from Member Bunting because I almost feel like it won't be fixed, because if you've had this information centralized, the 63 QVCs, correct?
Right. Yes.
You have education officers across the QVCs, correct?
Right.
You have in a database the information that education officers would have provided about curricula, student performance, information for school upgrades, and you could even plug into that database to identify the institutional memory of how a school has been performing, correct?
Right.
Why would you need the World Bank to tell you how to audit? Because the answer you gave me last week was that you're now in a good position because you now have the audit of the World Bank. And my issue is these things have been consistent problems. Now that you have the World Bank audit, it will fix it. The textbook situation, the upgrading of the schools, can you definitively say that that audit will plug all the problems that you have faced before?
No, MP. The World Bank audit was actually a very good coincidence that focused specifically on the technical infrastructure, meaning the walls, and if there are any cracks in the walls, if there are any breaches in the columns, if there seem to be roof that may be leaking, and so on. So it really did not focus on furniture or textbook or the other areas. But what was interesting and exciting about the World Bank audit is that it allows for you to plan over a longer period of time. So it will say to you that this is a crack here based on the structural engineer. In another 3 years, or if there's an earthquake, this is going to be the extent of the damage, and so on. So that makes us in a better position to plan long term. But MP, outside of that, we had already done an island-wide audit, which is referred to for the infrastructure works. But what we had prior to now is a year-by-year audit based on the amount of money that we have in the maintenance and capital budget. But that really did not allow us to have a long-term plan. So my response earlier will allow us now to have a long-term maintenance plan and a long-term plan in terms of what we have in the budget so that we can gradually be providing support. So the World Bank audit is really not the answer to all the problems. We have to do the work. I take the point really QEC's MP and our Chief Education Officer has responsibility for the education officers who are conveners of the QECs to access that database and to make sure that within the QECs they are reviewing that data at their meetings and they are working collectively in terms of fixing some of the issues locally. And that is why MP Bunting's suggestion in terms of focusing more at the local level than keeping the system centralized will definitely assist us in really ensuring that we are fixing the problems at the local level. So the ministry at Central will just focus on the maintenance of the database, the update of the information, the analysis of the information, and allow for the QECs with the relevant staff to effect the repair programs that are needed at that level. Now, if I move on,
Before we move on, just one question. In terms of a corollary to the suggestion about pushing more resources to the local level for maintenance, in terms of financial control at the local level, if you're giving more resources to expend on maintenance at that level, one would want to feel satisfied that the bursar or whatever the arrangements are at the school level to ensure that the funds are used for the purposes for which they are given and so on are in place. So I would just say that I don't know whether there's a uniform level across all schools of diligence around financial matters, but that would be something which I would see. While you're kind of adopting that approach, which is a very sound approach and allows much more flexibility and nimbleness in dealing with problems around maintenance, one would want to make sure that the institutions that are getting the resources are able to account for them properly.
Yes, Chairman, and that is extremely important at this time as it relates to the fiduciary responsibility. Now, the service level agreement is usually signed off by the PS as well as the board chairman. There is a local procurement committee that we have encouraged or mandated each school to have. And the building officer, we have at least 2 per region. They also provide the guidance that is needed. And so they have to follow the procurement guidelines to go through whatever projects they are going to be undertaken. We also have started to empower our bursars. Their positions were upgraded. Many of them are now on a training program at Mind to be completed within a year, and so they will have the responsibility to monitor these programs. For the primary schools, the larger primary schools, we are now in the process of ensuring that they all have bursars, and then for the smaller primary schools, the ministry is prepared to continue to provide direct support through our financial controllers while we try to see how best we can provide bursars in clusters. So that's a part of the dilemma that we are faced with sometimes. So while we are really trying to decentralize and to ensure that the support is there, we still have to ensure that the monitoring based on the guidelines that we have to ensure that there is value for money and proper procedures.
I have a question around issue 2, but just I understand your concern, Mr. Chairman, that we should not only devolve the budgets and the responsibilities, but we also need to ensure that the competencies are there to handle it. I'm not sure, though, having kept it at Central and what we're seeing here, that the competencies were at the Central Ministry either. So I don't think we're risking anything by putting it further downstream. But just to focus on issue 2, which and principally the purchase of textbooks. And before I go to my point, I just want some clarification. In the report itself, the Auditor General has report. It says secondary schools are given the option to select textbooks for each subject area from 3 titles in 33 subject areas. And I want to focus on the secondary schools because I have some experience in my own constituency of parents coming with rather substantial book lists that they're procuring at private bookstores in Mandeville, for example. Now, I didn't have a sense of how, or I don't have a sense of how you combine this option to select textbooks for each subject area from 3 titles in 33 subject areas, and how that complements that private book list system. So if you could just expand on this a little. I have a question around it, but I want to make sure that I understand the system that operates currently.
Okay. Yes, sir. So the ministry spends at least $870 million per year on textbooks and resources for our schools at the primary and the secondary level. At the primary level, from grade 1 to 3, we provide books that are disposables. They are workbooks, so it means that the students write in these books, in addition to a few readers and other support materials. At grade 4 to 3, we provide the actual textbooks to focus on the primary exit profile. At the secondary level, we provide all the books that are required on the secondary textbook list, which also included, since I think it was about 2017, the literature books which were not provided before. Now at the secondary, so while at the primary level, we work through in terms of our data, read the number of students and ensure that each student has a book, and those are managed by their classroom teacher in terms of the distribution and so on. At the secondary level, we offer what is called a loan scheme. What this means is that the ministry about 7 years ago would have provided all the books that are required for the curriculum, and these books are expected to last for a period of 5 to 7 years, depending on whether the syllabus change at the grade 10 and grade 11. Each year, the students would be provided with the books based on the programs that they are doing, and then they return those books at the end of the year. Now, having provided a full set of books about 7 years ago, the ministry does what we call a top-up each year. So each year, December of each year, we send to the schools the approved textbook listing, which would have been reviewed, and we ask the schools to select from 3 titles based on the 33 subjects that are stated here, because schools have the opportunity to use...
There's 3 titles for each subject?
Right, 3 titles for each subject, right. Because schools sometimes choose different books depending on which they believe they are more comfortable with and the content based on the ethos and so on of the school. Now,
so they would choose one of the 3
one
on
of the
offer.
3 for each subject. Now, when that is submitted, sir, we provide the schools with a percentage which we call top-up. So we do not provide them with 100% of the books because they already have an inventory base with the books. So we provide between 25% and 50% as a top-up. And if there are schools each year, and if there are schools that have come upon hard times, for example, there may have been a fire or some other kind of disasters, then we consider providing additional books. So this has allowed us, that is why you would have seen in the Auditor General report that the amount that we spent in 2013-2014 was much higher than what we spent in 2017-2018 because we provide a percentage of the books that are needed for the system each year. Now, just to say, sir, for 2019, 1920, with the introduction of the National Standards Curriculum, we are now changing out the books. So between 1920 and 2021, we will be spending close to $2 billion to have all the books replaced, new books, so that the system is now starting over and we continue with the 25% or the 35 or up to 50%, depending on what the schools require. To address further, MP, your issue in terms of the book lists, there is really no need for an additional book list outside of the books that the ministry provides, especially at the secondary level. We, however, encourage wide reading, and so there's a supplementary listing that parents may purchase those books if they would like their children to have those books. Those books are not necessarily mapped on to the curriculum for the different subject areas. And each year, the ministry goes through a process of approving the textbook list for each school, and that is what we expect that the schools are actually giving to the students. And from time to time, we find that the book list is a little different from what was approved, and that is where our CEO comes in with the education officers to work through that with the board, sir.
I mean, I hear the process that you're describing there, but I'm telling you the experience I have as an MP is far different. And I'm sure I see my colleague Frank nodding his head, because the book lists that are presented, the parents are of the opinion that these are mandatory reading lists. I must tell you, as an MP, you know, I have had to assist over the years with many book lists, and I wish I had this information which said that there is no need for anything additional beyond what is provided by the Ministry of Education, because I could have saved the CDF a lot of money, because I mean, make a substantial allocation for these additional book lists. So I think some public education on this would be very important.
A major source
because
of stress for parents.
As I'm looking around, I think we have, there's a common experience of all MPs, and we interface particularly intensively during this first term of the school year around issues like book lists, and I can tell you it causes a lot of stress to parents during this time. But the substantive question that I think, and I apologize to my colleagues who may have heard me raise this in Parliament before, but this is the first time I'm having a chance to put it to the Ministry of Education officials. You've been struggling to introduce this tablet in schools program for years. If we moved away from these tablets and just looked at a sensible laptop for each child, a laptop could last a high school student for, let's say, 3 years, so they might need two during the course of their high school years. Couldn't you then just provide, if you had a learning management system that you actually integrated this into the delivery of the teaching and learning process, and the relevant material that you would perhaps have to license from the publishers, but you just deliver it online? Or certainly you could start with those schools that have Wi-Fi, which would, I think, cover the majority of the population of students. And you decentralize it, by the way. Don't get Universal Service Fund or whoever is doing it now to try and be buying hundreds of thousands of laptops or tablets or whatever, but decentralize it once again to the local, to the school level. And then you deliver the content that they need in an ebook format, really making it easy that each child in each grade level would have, once they sign in with their credentials, they could access all that reading material that's necessary, rather than them having to be dealing with the vagaries of the inventory management system, etc. All of this could be delivered using technology, and I can bet you it would be a lot cheaper than replacing these physical textbooks year after year.
Yes, MP, I agree and support what you are saying, sir, and over time, this is where we will be forced to go. The truth is, CXC has started to introduce e-testing. And as a part of introducing e-testing, it simply means that e-teaching has to begin. And so we have a team in place that we have completed the island-wide review and assessment of the ICT needs of the system. And we have all our high schools, well, let me say the high school, not the full system. We have them on a continuum, those that are at 20%, 30%, 80%, 90%. We are currently working with the Overseas Examinations Commission, and each year they provide to our schools close to 1,000 laptops and desktop computers, depending on the needs of the schools, their facility and so on. Those laptops that are provided as well as desktops, they are front-loaded with content, electronic content that our media services unit at the ministry has developed over time and licensed that we have with specialized publishers and some book suppliers. So that we have already started. The ministry also has a budget of about 300 million per year for ICT support. And so far we have at least 5 schools that are very close to be creating an e-learning environment, e-learning, e-teaching environment, and we are using those schools to support another 30 schools that we expect should get there within another year, year and a half, and then we will move ahead with the additional schools. So it is, we have to go there, sir, sooner than later, and the ministry has started to put things in place. It will take a little more time for the primary schools, and perhaps that's maybe the reason why tablets are provided, because they're smaller, they can be stored in little carts, and you can have them moving around the school for different students to use, and of course being age appropriate. But we also have all the PEP content that is available electronically, and once tablets are being provided, we also ensure that the content is uploaded. And finally, sir, just to say that there are 320 of our schools at this time who do not have readily available access to Wi-Fi. And so those are the schools that we must make sure that once they get computers, that they have enough content and an internal server that can be utilized to support them with the materials for teaching.
Yeah, and I suspect that approximately 1/3 of the schools that don't have Wi-Fi are probably the smaller,
yes,
more rural, deep rural schools.
Yes,
so in
sir.
terms of the number of students, it's probably much less than 1/3. It's probably,
yes,
I would just guess, maybe 10 or 15%. In those cases, you can establish a local area network that
right,
the material is just downloaded from a local server at those schools. So that's not a major problem. But the whole integration of technology into the classroom and the whole learning and teaching management system is not a new technology.
Yes.
Schools in Jamaica, private schools in Jamaica, have been using it for over 15 years. And so it is something that you can easily allow, once again, the initiative of the schools who are ready or are prepared to make themselves ready to go ahead. But when you manage this, that we have a system that we're going to try and introduce, and you're trying to manage it for 900 and odd schools at one time, it is going to really reduce everybody to the lowest common denominator. And through allowing the schools that are ready to go ahead, It will allow them to develop best practice that you can then migrate across the rest of the system, and the other schools in the areas, in the QECs, is that
Yes,
what it's called? The other schools in the QECs will have those as models to follow, and it will be easy to migrate best practice across your principals associations, for example, that many MPs have in our constituencies.
Yes.
So once again, just the 2 points I want to make here around the textbooks is, one, accelerate the elimination, the need to buy physical textbooks, and move to delivering the content on some laptop or electronic based.
Yes.
But secondly, we have seen we are not good certainly not in the public sector, and I would even say in the private sector, but certainly not in the public sector. We're not good at project execution. And almost by definition, any project that you try and do system-wide in the Ministry of Education is a massive project. So it's not going to be executed quickly and efficiently. We can just assume that. So let us break it into bite-sized portions and allow those schools that are ready to pioneer it, to demonstrate their initiative. Devolve the budgets to them and allow them to really, start introducing it now. I mean, as I said, it's been 15 years in practice in private schools in Jamaica. So it's not no new technology, it's a well-established technology.
Well, you've heard that PS, that exhortation to, to modernize the delivery through using the technology.
Yes,
and yeah, I think that's the way the world's going, and I would encourage you to embrace the suggestions from Member Bunting. Member Hannah, you wanted to say something?
And PS, I'm a little bit at pains to say it, because as an MP myself, we have personal involvement in ensuring the boards are up to date, etc. And I fall into a bit of a bind, because on the MP side is one thing, but on the other side, where I see thousands of persons applying for jobs in a particular area, and I am disappointed in some instances when I meet young people who have gone through primary school, gone through high school, secondary school, apply for the jobs, and then when we do a diagnostic test, they cannot pass at a grade 2 level. And these are real experiences that I'm having. And I wonder if all of the things that you're saying about textbooks and the kinds of money that we're spending on education, at what point do we stop to really, because if we are looking at productivity in Jamaica and people wanting jobs, etc., there's a significant portion of young people who are going through the system. I hear about upgrading in terms of technology, and maybe the teaching and learning needs to change. But at this point, I have employers, and as an employer myself, I can't sit here and tell you that parts of the Ministry of Education are not failing, because I'm seeing failing students applying for jobs. And at that point, we have had to implement, in another reality that I'm faced with, other kinds of mechanisms to give persons who have applied to prop up what they have done. And so somewhere our citizens are not getting value for money.
But remember, the data supports it. If you look at the percentage of schools that generate students from CSET with 5 passes, it's a very low percentage. There are a lot of it's just a manifestation of the same thing. In other words, that there are large elements of the system that are not producing literate and numerate graduates. And it's affecting the productivity of the workforce and the growth of the economy and everything else. So, how we tackle this is a very fundamental issue of national development.
Yes. So, Chairman and MP, if I may just say a few words on that, and I accept that we have close to 3,500 of our students at the end of grade 11 who are not ready to leave grade 11. In 2011, that was about 12,000. And that's part of the reason for the ministry to have introduced CAP, because what CAP does is to keep them for an additional 2 years and to bring them up to the required level. Fortunately, CAP is being institutionalized in almost all the high schools now, where they can actually remain in those schools and be provided with the upgrading programs that they require. So really and truly, we are not quite there yet where we are seeing all our students leaving at the level that we want them to leave. But the ministry introduced in 2015 the alternative pathway at secondary, and what it does is that it provides different options, customized intervention to assist our students. So we are seeing more of our students moving over onto the side of having the required competencies. We have also introduced other examinations, for example, the National Vocational Qualification, as well as the City and Guilds examinations, and these are also assisting our students in inching them up closer to the level that we need them to be. We also firmly believe, Chairman and members, that the introduction of PEP, using a more practical applied approach towards the preparation of our young people, we are going to start seeing a better set of students actually moving into the secondary level with the competencies that are required. So, MP, what I would say that in your case, for those students who you come across those challenges, the ministry is willing to support graduates. We are willing to support through the career advancement program. We not only support in terms of the tuition, but we also pay their examination fees if they need to resit. And even if we have to put a customized intervention in place to support them, we will also support them for an additional 2 years.
Mr. Chair, what kind of benchmark you use to determine those students, graduates, to determine whether or not they are ready to leave or
So the requirement based on the K to 13 strategy that the ministry has now is that the minimum requirement for leaving the secondary level should be maths, English, and a marketable skill. So 3 subjects, that's the minimum requirement. A student who has maths and English, whether in CSEC or City and Guilds, and let's say customer service or data operations, can actually enter the workplace in an entry-level job. So that's the minimum requirements. We have different institutions, though, that cluster different subjects. So there are some schools that you have all the students who are doing CSEC. There are some schools that have a mixture of CSEC, the NVQ, and City and Guilds, and there are some schools that just do the vocational qualification. So that decision is what is taken at the local level. We, however, by 2020, we will start offering a national school leaving certificate or a diploma, which will now detail the students' competencies at the back of the certificate, as well as speaking towards their involvement in sports, cultural activities, and their general development over the period of high school. So this will be now used as a measure for them to leave the secondary system, sir.
Right. P.S. Member Hannah wants to follow up, and I also have a question on this issue.
P.S. What percentage of the persons that you're speaking about, what percentage would you say the Ministry of Education is failing if they're leaving high school and can't perform above a grade 9 level? I would even say a grade 7 level. What is the percentage that you say exists now?
Well, let me look at it, MP, in terms of the cohort. We have a cohort of 40,000 students per year at secondary, And of that 40,000, there's about 3,500 of our students who are at varying levels of the continuum, a grade 7 level, grade 8, and so on. So this 3,500, you can work out the percentage for me, is the number that we know we have to treat with for remedial education each year.
But P.S., could I just ask you one thing? At the primary school level is, I think, where the issue needs to be tackled. Yes. Frontally, because I'm aware of schools in less less privileged parts of Jamaica, where the cohort coming into grade 7, first form, year after year, is persons who the average grade in maths at GSAT, as it used to be, is 30%. English, not that dissimilar. So you're having entire cohorts coming into high schools with very, very low grades in the fundamental subjects. Now, what is going wrong at the primary school level that isn't addressing this and fixing it at an early age? Because it's much harder to correct this the older the child gets. They've missed much more of what they should have already got because they couldn't read and write and they weren't numerate. So they're just in class, probably hiding their deficiencies and losing self-esteem. So we really need to tackle this much more comprehensively earlier in their lives. And I think that is a much richer dividend to solving those issues then and trying to solve it when they're at the cap, the career advancement, when they're nearly adults at that stage. You know, they're really playing catch up. So I'd love your comment on that.
Yes, so Chairman, you are correct. And that is why we had to push through, change the curriculum, and implement a different type of assessment at primary. At primary, there is, while we call it alternative pathway at secondary, we call it a proficiency pathway at the primary. And that actually starts from age 4, because there's a age 4 assessment which gives us the early signs as to the areas that we need to be looking out for in our little babies as they are developing. So there is a program when they get to grade 4, then there is customized intervention that is done. Now the challenge we have when you have a student who has not mastered grade 4, because of the space that we have within our schools, we can't actually keep back that student in grade 4. So you will find that within this 3,500, they may move up to grade 6, but they are actually operating at a grade 4 level. So by the time they master at grade 6, it means that they still would have missed out in terms of the levels of grade 5 and grade 6. And so,
well, to me, that is the crux of our problem in the educational system, what you've just described.
But sorry, P.S., because, and forgive me, because our QSR business is testing a lot of the applicants coming in and finds that 50% of them are not passing a basic diagnostic test. And we have had to actually start our own facility to be able to bring some of these basic applicants up. So I don't know where you're getting your information from, but in the workforce, that's not what we're seeing.
Okay, so MP, maybe if I have a look at the diagnostic test that is utilized, then, well, I will have to look into that, MP, in terms of that actual diagnostic test, because I'm not seeing that kind of data in terms of the tests that we do within the ministry, because at the end of grade 6, MP, we place the students in categories. So we have those that are on pathway 1, who are ready, those who are on pathway 2, and those who are special needs who are pathway 3. And that is the information that we use to determine the type of intervention. And so this 3,500 that I mentioned, while they move on to high school, because the A step The evaluation from A-STEP would have shown us that they became very disruptive when we kept them in the primary schools. So what we have done is to engage literacy and numeracy and pathway coaches, and these coaches who are at the secondary level, almost a pre-grade 7 program. They treat directly with these students to gradually try to bring them up to the required level. So I must say that we perhaps are not there yet, Chairman and members, in terms of nailing the interventions, but I must say to you that we are constantly reviewing, constantly doing our research, and constantly trying to provide greater support for the system. That is why we have 100 numeracy coaches. This year we will have up to 30 literacy coaches, and we have the pathway support coaches in all our high schools to support the students in bringing them up to the different levels.
It needs to be done at the primary school level. I think more emphasis, more attention has to be paid to solving the issues at that age when they're 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. Because what is happening is that they're coming in droves, and it's not the champions and immaculates, of course, that get this, but it's the other schools at the other end of the spectrum who are deemed to be underperforming schools or whatever. But if you look at the intake, those children are not ready for high school intellectually, and that's the vast majority of who they have to deal with. And I think we need to solve that problem early rather than late. I just want to mention, members, that we have some visitors in the gallery. These are some students, quite a large number of students from Mineral Heights Primary School in Clarendon. And welcome, students. It's lovely to see you. This is a public accounts committee you're looking at, yes. And we're actually reviewing a report on the Ministry of Education and how they spend their money on maintaining the schools and textbooks and furniture. So the issues are issues that you encounter every day, which is not often the case when students come to see us. But welcome, and it's very, very good to have you. Members, could we move on through the prompt so we can at least just finish it up? There's one question I had wanted to ask the PS on, which is not related to the prompt, but I don't want to, maybe in any other business I'll ask her.
Yeah, well, I know you're anxious to get through the prompt, but I have a question in relation to her previous answer, and you spoke to the various assessments and then remedial interventions.
Yes, sir.
Since the video, the Pembroke Hall video has been going around, many persons have sent or circulating other videos which I must tell you demonstrate a shocking level of coarseness and inappropriate behavior by many students at both primary and secondary levels. And it really, I don't know what the entire context of what happened at Pembroke Hall was, but I must tell you, I feel sympathy to any teacher who has to face that on a daily basis in some of the videos that we've seen going around. Is there a deliberate program of socialization at the entry level, at somewhere in that probably 4 to 6 year old, where we can't assume that every child is coming from a home environment where they have already adopted civil behavior, they have appropriate collaboration skills, respect for their fellow students and the teachers, etc. Is there a deliberate socialization component of the early teaching process?
So, MP, the curriculum at grade 1 to 3 is an integrated curriculum that focuses on the children themselves. So it focuses on my body and me, and they getting accustomed to their overall being as a person. There is also another component which speaks about my family and how you relate. And there is also another component that speaks about my community. So these are integrated packages that are built into the curriculum that the teachers are expected to bring out these concepts and get the students to be engaged in role play and other activities to understand the context within which they operate and the environment around them. And over time, we have worked with UNICEF for a number of years now to introduce child-friendly schools. So there are other concepts that are actually done in terms of just the general environment, the setup of the classroom, how the students are treated, and so on. We have found, however, sir, that the challenges are mainly at the secondary level. And so over the last 7 years, we have introduced what we call the school-wide positive behavior intervention and support program. And that program allows for a 3-tier approach where we categorize all our programs. So tier 1 is where we, for example, our health and family life education, where we treat with 5 clear themes, and we have provided teachers for all the schools for these programs. Tier 2 is where we now have to provide some more detailed intervention like counseling and other support. And Tier 3, that's where we have the 1% where we have the chronic cases that have to go to the child guidance clinic and for psychiatric treatment or so on. So we have a program. Now, MP, about 3 years ago, we engaged Professor Herbert Gale because he has done quite a bit of neurological research and studies in different countries. And we had island-wide sessions with our board chairs and principals to sensitize them to the understanding of how our children behave and the tips and so on that they can utilize to engage them. We also did extensive courses on investigation techniques. So for example, if there is a tattoo on the child's hand, maybe not a permanent one, what does it mean? What are the signs that will tell us that we need to be bringing in some of them into counseling? So we have been doing ongoing programs within our schools, and come January, we are going to be engaging our boards and our principal once more with our minister island-wide to go through another series of engagements to provide the kind of support that's needed to deal with the stress management, the anger management, and other related issues that actually do come into the schoolroom out of the communities and other areas that our students are exposed to. Just to say, we are working collectively to support our teachers, to support our students, and to support our administrators in whatever way we can. And I believe that these challenges that we are having is really a general problem that the entire country has to work collectively with education to see how we can re-socialize our children, sir.
Well, it's a very deep and pervasive problem.
It is, and I'm just wondering, the interventions or the approaches you talk about, and I'm always, P.S., a little bit skeptical of when we say we integrate these topics or these socialization, for example, into our regular classes, because it really doesn't guarantee that it's done or done adequately. And I think if we all recognize, collectively that this is it's a crisis, yes, that we're having, I think we need some more, serious radical intervention, yes, to address it.
Yes,
because I think the sort of approach that we've taken, we're probably being overwhelmed. And there's not sufficient resources to address the behavioral issues. I mean, I've had discussions with teachers that tell me that a lot of the time that they should be spending teaching, they're just trying to manage behavior issues. And it's not fair to then turn around and assess that teacher and say you didn't, your performance isn't up to scratch because you didn't, teach enough for the curriculum or whatever. When a significant amount of classroom time is spent just trying to maintain order and deal with disruptive behavior and that sort of thing. So, I really suggest that if your assessment that what you have now is not sufficient, I feel certain the Parliament would support significant additional resources to address this issue, because if we don't, it's going to sabotage the whole education system. So I encourage you to be assertive in the upcoming budget, because I'm sure this will be a bipartisan issue that we will support some radical intervention to get us back on track with just the school environment and something that is appropriate and conducive to learning and just to the proper socialization of our students.
Thank you very much, Member. Yes, I'm going to suggest you take that on board.
Yes, sir.
If we can move to issue 3. Issue 3 in the prompt concerns purchasing school furniture under fixed price contracts with specific manufacturers. And the ministry mainly used competitive bidding to purchase textbooks over the period 2013-14 to 17-18. We sampled contracts totaling 158 million for furniture manufacturing and noted that the ministry directly engaged the manufacturers under 3-year fixed price arrangements. The ministry did not provide any analysis that informed its decision to enter into the contracts, including the expected savings. We saw no evidence that the ministry conducted post-evaluations to determine if the arrangement proved to be a viable method. Our review of 44 contracts valuing $3.9 billion for supplying textbooks to primary and secondary schools revealed that the ministry awarded 38 contracts, which is 86% of them, valuing $3.2 billion on a competitive basis, facilitating the acquisition of textbooks at economical prices. So there's a 86% of the contracts for textbooks were done competitively, were bidded competitively, but the other 14% weren't, apparently. And then in the furniture area, the direct contracting on these 3-year fixed price arrangements seems to have been the norm. Management's response: the ministry can confirm 158 million was used to engage manufacturers under a 3-year fixed price contract. This allowed the ministry to save over the period. The ministry is, however, commencing the engagement of a formal evaluation regarding 3-year fixed price contracts to see whether this approach has resulted in savings. Considering the significant expenditure on textbooks and furniture, the ministry's procurement management function should be supported by efficient inventory and monitoring systems. And AG's response there in terms of verification is that the ministry stated that the competitive process to begin in January 2020 and end April 2020 for the 2020-21 school year. So is to begin, I assume, is what that meant. So could you just explain what that is referring to there in terms of the furniture contracts?
Okay, so Chairman, we sought and got approval from the Ministry of Finance in 2012 for specific rates to be provided for contractors that we would have been approved and we could engage to make furniture for our students on a yearly basis. We felt that this was very attractive because we had a fixed price that would last for a 3-year period, and we would know exactly the amount that we would need to budget for, and we could actually guarantee that there would not have been any overrun in the budget. The Auditor General has indicated to us at the time when we were audited that we did not do an evaluation to determine if this fixed price contract really would have benefited us over the period. So we did an evaluation after the exit interview of the audit, and we really have found that while we expected that we could have had significant savings, that during that period there are other suppliers who have come on the market and their furniture seemed to be of good quality. In some cases, the price is being lower than the fixed term or fixed price contract that we had and we were using. We also had some difficulties in terms of the centralization of the contractors for the production of this furniture and for distribution island-wide. So while we may save an amount on the actual construction or the actual making of the piece of furniture, it cost us in terms of the delivery to schools in Montego Bay and Hanover and so on. So based on the evaluation, the ministry has decided now to engage 3 strategies going forward, and we have already started. So for one, we will do the national competitive bidding, and you read it in the report, Chairman, that we will commence that process, which we have actually started to put things in place so that contractors from all over the island can put in their bid and we do the evaluation. We have selected a group of schools that will be using their industrial arts and engineering departments to actually produce furniture. We have selected 6 lead schools, and these lead schools have actually started to set up their production line, working with the students as well as the teachers, and they will be able to make furniture on an ongoing basis. So instead of waiting until next April to August to make furniture, they will be making and delivering to schools that we identify within their local. And thirdly, we will adopt a strategy which we are calling the Procure Your Own strategy. So we will provide especially our high schools with the funding that they require, and they will do their own procurement from reputable suppliers. And in September of each year, we will do the verification to ensure that the procurement is done, the information is uploaded into the inventory management system, and of course, we, as a part of our guidelines, ensure that the furniture that is being purchased is approved by the Bureau of Standards. So we are not going to be continuing with the fixed price contract as we had initially, but we are sure many of these contractors will still put in their bid to be considered for contracts for the provision of furniture for the school system, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. PS, why don't we just go to the Procure Your Own system across the board? I mean, why now you've recognized the weaknesses in this centralized procurement and tendering, because even when you get a better price for the procurement, you end up probably paying more by the time you deal with the delivery, etc. Why not just decentralize this to the school level? I mean, it can't be beyond the competencies of a principal and bursar to buy desks and chairs.
Chairman, our thoughts, sir, were that for the high schools, they would do their own procurement, but for the primary schools, especially the very small ones, that we would do the centralized procurement. But we will review, sir, and we will have the discussion and take a decision accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Moving to issue 4, again to do with expenditure on textbooks and furniture. And this is to do with the need for the procurement to be supported by an efficient inventory and monitoring system. And the report showed that while some schools have excess furniture, others are undersupplied, and there's little redistribution to achieve an optimal allocation among the schools. And this is critical due to budgetary limitations where the ministry was unable to meet most of the requests for school furniture. So the ministry reported it was unable to provide 76% of desks and benches and 81% of chairs and stools that were requested by schools. And this underscores the need for better planning and coordination. So where you're not able to deliver the requests from the schools for furniture, chairs and stools and benches and so on, you need to have an efficient monitoring of stock and inventory so you can allocate more efficiently amongst, so that you balance the needs as best you can. The response from the ministry is that they, as they're doing for textbooks, they're developing software to guide the furniture allocation process alongside the textbook process. The Chief Procurement Officer will be responsible for monitoring the database to ensure regular updates, proper budget allocation, and collection and redistribution as necessary. This will further ensure that allocation is not done disproportionately. The ACEO, what does that stand for?
Assistant Chief Education Officer, sir.
Thank you. In school operations, quality assurance will work closely with the Chief Procurement Officer to ensure that the process is effectively coordinated. And the status report verification, the ministry noted that the proposed time frame is September 2019 to April 2020. So this is to do with trying to have a better process of monitoring your stock of furniture and where you're short and where you're not short and how you can reallocate.
What this tells me, Mr. Chairman, is that if we cannot supply, if the ministry cannot provide 76% of the desks and benches and 81% of chairs, it's a completely dysfunctional system. So rather than trying to fix it, just get out of it. Just send that budget directly to the schools, just like everything else we've been talking about in maintenance. Desks, chairs, everything have a useful life. A certain percentage of them will need to be replaced every year. So you just take the budget that you have centrally for that and divide that up amongst the schools in proportion to the population of the school, etc. So, I mean, we are making things unnecessarily complicated and now going to look for software and algorithms to manage this allocation. It seemed to me if the ministry would just get out of that business altogether. The only person who might be concerned is, will we still need an ACEO in schools operation quality assurance? You may need less posts at the head office, but apart from that, the system will definitely function more efficiently. Just empower the schools with the budget for these basic things. Why are we doing them centrally? It is totally unnecessary. And we're not even doing it well. We're doing it horribly. Because if we're not satisfying 76 and 81% of desks and
well, that sounds to be a
respectively.
financial constraint, though. That is the reason for that.
Well, some schools had excess furniture. Some were undersupplied. It's not clear that this is as a result of financial constraints.
Certainly the lack of a system of knowing what is where and who has what, it means that you have those kind of disparities in the system. But anyway,
much better managed at the local level.
Yes,
Mr.
it would
Chairman,
be.
is my,
it would be. I would accept.
Much
Like
better chance
maintenance.
of the principal and bursar knowing what their need of desks and chairs, etc.
And it also would help the local economy as well, insofar as local artisans can make the furniture. I know that you already issue contracts to small manufacturers to supply furniture. I know the central ministry has been doing that, and I would imagine that the schools could do the same. But what are your comments on the idea of Member Bunty?
So, Chairman and member, it would be our joy if we are able to provide the adequate funds that we believe that each school require to change their furniture, let's say every 5 years. Unfortunately, and I think it is mentioned in the report, the funding that's provided for the procurement of furniture, which is about $150 million per year, cannot accommodate us changing out all the furniture in our 1,000 schools over that 5-year period that we would love to. Now, in terms of how schools are managed locally by boards, schools also are provided with a lot of gifts. So Food for the Poor, for example, will just take a trailer that goes to a school that is full of furniture So there are some schools that have furniture for graduation and special functions that they have locked away somewhere outside of what they use in their labs and what they use in the classrooms, while there are some schools that have to use the same chairs for every activity. And also, whenever we put out a call for furniture, which we did up to this year, each year, then the request for furniture is significantly more than what we can provide and what we believe the system requires. So for example, the 76% that is noted here, in doing the audit across the island and the verification, we have not seen where all the schools needed all that they have requested. But it is ideal, it's a wish list if you have a desk that is not too new, and there is a call for you to say that I need new furniture to change that out.
And they probably pad it because they know they're only going to probably get 20% of what they
Right,
asked
so
for.
we have seen, Chairman, some issues where the actual need. What I can say though is that we currently have the full audit of the system in terms of what the system requires now, and the three methods that I mentioned, for example, the schools that are going to be producing, will allow us to gradually reduce the number of pieces of furniture that they will need over time. MP Bunting, I will ensure that I have discussions, sir, and lobby as best as possible for additional funding support for furniture. We will also work out a formula in terms of what can adequately supply each school, and we will try to see how that can be included in our budget. And once we see where that is provided, what we will do is to build support at the primary school so they can also purchase their own furniture and commence and continue that system of decentralization, which will allow, sir, the ACEO that you mentioned to focus on school improvement and not furniture counting and allocation.
Thank you, PS. We have two more matters which we can get through. One is to do with correct quality and quantity of goods and services and whether they are purchased at the best available price. And the procurement process is supposed to achieve that. But without an effective inventory management system, that is impossible. And the AG's department visited 18 secondary schools in Region 1 and noticed that schools did not maintain adequate inventory records to account for textbooks and could not provide information reconciling the amount of textbooks issued against the stock that they have. The failure to maintain an efficient inventory system contributed to schools having large quantities of unused textbooks in some subject areas, while other schools had a short supply of textbooks in the same subject areas. This was despite the ministry establishing a protocol for the monitoring of textbooks in schools through its media services unit. So you have a protocol, but it's not being followed. And the response from the ministry, in October 2019, the ministry will commence the training of education resources administrators in inventory management. This will include 10 workshops between October and November 2019. The target participants are those teachers responsible for managing and administering the educational resources in schools. The main presentation will focus on inventory management in schools. The ministry will conduct periodic on-spot audits informed by the reports from the electronic system. And in terms of status and verification, the ministry indicated by way of email on November 14th that the training was rescheduled to January to February 2020 based on a change in the training module to incorporate use of videos. So you're going to be using videos as part of the training. So again, the inventory management system is critical because you have these disparities between institutions who have too much and others who have too little. And I think this point has been made previously.
That's the same point and the final point is essentially around the same issue.
So I think we can wrap up. I just wanted to ask one question, if I may, and it's not to do with procurement, but it's to do with some of the issues we touched on earlier. And it's to do with the language, the use of language. I am wondering to what extent, in your view, PS, some of the poor performance that we see coming into the secondary schools from the primary schools and following its way through till they leave, is as a result of a lack of a realistic approach to how we deal with children in the educational system for whom English is not their first language. We have a Jamaican language which, for various reasons, has not been recognized as such, but which has its own distinct syntax and grammar and some of its own vocabulary, and which is in many households what is spoken by the children. And there are other countries which adopt teaching an international language as a second language, using the home language of the students to ensure that they understand the basic tenets of what it is they're supposed to be grasping. This is not to say one is promoting anything other than trying to encourage the educational system to produce persons who are literate and competent in English as an international language. It's more a question of the methodology that is employed given the social realities of Jamaica, where many homes are not homes where standard English is spoken, and therefore children are coming into the system in large numbers for whom Jamaican is their primary language, but they're not being taught with that in mind. I was wondering whether, what's the ministry's take on this? So there's a seminar coming up at the linguistics department at UE in December on this topic, which I'll be attending. I'm a panelist, and I wanted to hear from the ministry. I know a pilot program was done some time ago to look at trying to use the Jamaican language as a teaching tool for very young children, to help them to understand the basic concepts till they become proficient in English, and then the English can then take over as a language of study for them. But it's not been, I don't think, rolled out on a national basis, and I wonder what the ministry's view on this is.
Right. So, Chairman, the ministry's language policy accepts that our children, they are born into homes where the Jamaican vernacular is what is utilized. And so the policy outlines specific approaches that are used at the lower primary level to allow them to use their native language to bring out the actual aspects of the language of business, which is English, over time. And so at grade 1 to 3, the teachers are taught to use our patois to assist the students in forming and shaping the words as it relates to English within itself. So when they are doing the different words, they will pronounce them both in patois as well as in English. They will form sentences in both, and they use that to get the children to understand that you have to make that gradual transition. And that is why...
Is that in the teacher training colleges?
It's in the teacher training.
That's part of the approach that is taught to the teachers?
Yes, sir, and that is also the developmental workshops and support that we provide for the teachers. And I can actually provide you with a copy of the language policy that you could actually have a look at to see the approach.
I'd like to see that, yes.
Could I, well, maybe you could send it to the clerk and she could circulate it all, because I'm very interested in seeing that as well.
Right, so, but we accept that English is the language of business. And so at the CSEC and City and Guilds level, we have asked them to introduce also an oral component to the assessment, because what we have also found is that just in terms of how words are written, we are in the technological age, and sometimes we find that there are more acronyms that are actually being used than actual words within themselves. And our educators have recognized these, and we really do not want to disadvantage our students. So in City and Guilds, there is a speaking and listening component, and in the SBA for the CSEC, there is also an oral component, and this is to get our students to be comfortable with speaking the language of business. Now, the direction within which the world is going is one where language has become quite colorful. And when I say colorful, I mean that when you're making a speech, for example, as a Jamaican, If you intersperse with aspects of patois, Jamaica, no problem, and so on, it really adds a little color and a little flair to what you're saying. And other countries do the same thing. The Brazilians, they do it with the Portuguese, the Chinese do it with the Mandarin. So there is actually a wave of change in the manner within which we speak and we promote ourselves as a country. And so as educators, we continue to get our students to understand that while it is important to speak the language of business, it is also important to understand the context within which we operate culturally. The study that you spoke about, we are actually continuing with the language faculty at the university.
Jamaica Language Unit, I think.
Right, and it was highly successful. They actually utilized their methodology in about 35 of our schools, and it is our intention to roll this out in a certain number of schools for next year, and then a complete evaluation will be done, and we will take a decision as to how we move forward.
So I think the idea of it is to ensure that the child understands what the teacher is saying to them, and so that they're learning in a language that they understand, while they learn a language that they're not familiar with yet, until they become proficient with it.
Right,
and I think if we ignore that, we're going to, children who don't have the home life where standard English is spoken will be at a severe disadvantage.
And so, Chairman, that is why our examination bodies outside of the English language within itself, they really mark for content and concepts. So a child is not disadvantaged because of the particular expression or the word that you are used, or if there's a grammatical error when it is dealing with other subjects. So there are some principles.
But at the same time, I find even in the tertiary education system, we have a lot of students who don't have a basic appreciation of the grammar rules of English. So while we don't mark people down for those, if we focus on content and so on, unless English is taught in a way that will enable them to be proficient in grammar, they will never become that. And, and in the working world, it's expected that you can certainly, that you can communicate in standard English in a way that is in keeping with the rules of grammar, at least largely. So we have to be mindful that, and I'm not advocating for anything other than achieving proficiency in standard English. It's just a method by which you get there, which is what I think we need to really be very mindful of the fact that we are largely a Jamaican-speaking country, especially at that age.
Yes. So we're not quite there yet, sir, but we have seen significant improvement even in our athletes when they do their interviews.
Yes.
So we will continue to put the interventions in place, sir, as we move forward.
Thank you, PS. There being no other business, I would ask that we adjourn the meeting. Thank everyone for coming, and we will set a date in due course. Is that right? Or can we set a date from now? We can. Let's do it. So what we're going to do next. You happy? We could do that. Yeah, but we would like to do that as the next one then, please. So when can we do that? The 14th of January? All right. The 14th of January to do the RADA performance audit. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. January, yeah, that's it for the year. Parliament, they booked up all the meeting dates already for other things, the BOJ Act and all that.